Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today, this is the final video on Bismarck. And why is it the final video? Well, we're going to be looking at Bismarck's fall from power, which is quite dramatic actually. So let's begin. Bismarck's relationship with the Reichstag was always quite rough, however things only got worse with time. Now, although most of the time until 1881, where the Conservatives held the most power along with Zentrum, he still faced problems, as the SPD deputies often fought him on almost everything that he wanted to pass laws on. However, from 1881 onwards, the Progressives and Liberals held the majority of seats, and it's estimated that roughly 75% of the Reichstag was opposed to Bismarck. Now, of course, we can consider that quite a dramatic figure. There were certainly going to be people who supported Bismarck in every party. After all, things like liberals were eventually split up, stuff like that. However, overall, 75% roughly hated Bismarck. And we can kind of imagine that is going to be partially true just due to the fact of how many different parties he attacked or abandoned. So, between 1881 and 1886, no Conservative government or coalition with Conservatives in could actually command a majority in the Reichstag. And in 1886, Bismarck sought the Reichstag to support for a 10% rise in taxation for military funds. However, the Reichstag opposed this, and so he had it dissolved in January 1887. Now, I haven't mentioned this, but Bismarck, as Chancellor, had the ability to dissolve the Reichstag and then have an election called. So he did this in January 1887 and created a war scare about the French, which resulted in a pro-Bismarck combination of the two Conservative parties and the National Liberals. However, his control of the government still remained unstable, and this sort of combination of parties didn't really last that long. And in October 1890, Bismarck proposed a new permanent anti-socialist bill, which I mentioned in the previous video. But it sparked strong debate, and Bismarck implied letting the socialists rise up so the army could crush them once and for all. The Reichstag, of course, rejected this bill, and another election would be called. It increased the SPD and Progressive Party's representation, and it was actually to be Bismarck's last as Chancellor. But how exactly does Bismarck fall from power? I mean, it's not just going to be that the Progressives and SPD suddenly grow. Well, in 1888, the new Kaiser, Wilhelm II, imaginative name, I know, took the throne. However, he sought to separate himself from Bismarck and wield more power in the nation. Now, from a young age, Wilhelm II had always been quite a strange boy. He liked to play pranks on people. That was quite sadistic in nature. He had always, and it was due to the fact that his father was quite a horrid man to him. And so Wilhelm II himself had basically sought to become an independent leader. He desired to be loved by the entire nation, and so he wanted to essentially sweep aside Bismarck and be focused on by the people. So Bismarck, of course, naturally disagreed with the Kaiser on many things. You've got two very strong personalities who both want to be completely in charge, butting heads. One's the Kaiser and one is Bismarck. You can guess who's going to win eventually. But one of the many things they disagreed over was socialism. The Kaiser thought that he could win over the industrial workers, unlike Bismarck, who sought to simply oppress them and keep them in their standing. Now, the Kaiser was quite delusional in the fact that he thought he could get the certain workers to love him, and this will be a sort of common theme that you see, and it was especially worsened during World War I. They also disagreed on foreign policy, where the Kaiser sought friendship with Austria, while Bismarck favoured Russia. And of course, the Kaiser eventually winning with the alliance that, of course, later results in World War I. Now, this is the bit where the main downfall comes. Bismarck then puts forward two bills in 1890 calling for permanent anti-social laws and an increase of 125,000 men in the army. Now, Bismarck expected these to fail, so he planned to call upon the Bundesrat to alter the constitution and remove most of the power from the Reichstag. However, the new Kaiser, did not support this. He thought essentially Bismarck had lost touch with reality. He had gone insane almost. And in fact, in many ways, you can call that. Bismarck was constantly trying to put through new laws that he knew were going to fail. He was constantly meddling and dissolving the Reichstag. Bismarck then accused the Kaiser of meddling in foreign affairs and ordered all ministers to approach Bismarck first, then the Kaiser. This was the tipping point. The Kaiser had had enough at this point. Now, the Chancellor can only be dismissed by one person, the Kaiser, which is why Bismarck's conflict with Kaiser Wilhelm II was unwise. And of course, it resulted in March 1890, Bismarck was forced to resign. But why did Bismarck think he could get away with this? He thought he could control Kaiser Wilhelm II, appeal to his nature of wanting to be in control, because he had done the same with Wilhelm I. He had essentially used his abilities. He would throw tantrums, and I mentioned this last video. He would throw tantrums, get upset, with people, and he would essentially use that to influence Kaiser Wilhelm II to let Bismarck do what he wanted. It didn't work on Kaiser Wilhelm I. Wilhelm I, as I mentioned, really wanted to be separate. He wanted to be his own man. He wanted to rule Germany. As we'll look at in later videos, it resulted, of course, in him eventually just ruling without Reichstag support. So overall, what was Bismarck's time as Chancellor like? Well, it had its up and downs, as most people do when they find themselves as leader of a nation, but it is still debated how helpful he is to Germany, because the result of his meddling in the Reichstag made it almost impossible for any of his successors to control the Reichstag, aka Caprivi, things like that, the new chancellors under Wilhelm II. Thank you for watching.